is an amateur game. I mean, the professional side of it, there are idols and heroes and fun to watch them play. But I mean, if it wasn't for amateur golf, there would be no golf.
On a nice day, it's very scoreable. When you go play it on a 15, 20 mile an hour day and you're hanging on to your pants. And I think I love that about that style of golf, link style of golf.
You have to remember, when you play a golf course and you're out there for 4 hours or whatever, you're only hitting a ball for 15 minutes of that. So there's a lot of time to look around.
Welcome back to the Top 100 Clubhouse podcast. I'm Jasper Miners, and today we're joined with Michael Verity. So Michael and I, we've played golf a couple of times together. You remember a couple of golf courses, but the one that we played at last was Hayling down on the south coast. So England's best forgotten links, I think.
Yeah, no, it's a really good course. I've been a member there. It was during COVID times. I was obviously couldn't go overseas at all, so I was sort of looking for a second club to join. And Hayling got put on my radar by a friend of mine, and I went down and played it, and I was blown away by how good it was, and I couldn't sort of believe how little I'd heard about it. So. Within a couple of rounds, I was inquiring about how to sort of join, and I've been there ever since. So coming up for like 4 or 5 years now. I love it. I'm actually going down there tomorrow, so it's a great course for winter as well because it drains so well. The turf is just superb.
Yeah. So and you get the benefit of probably some of the best weather in the UK being on the south coast. Literally next stop, the other side of the channel is France. So. Great weather, year-round golf, superb turf. The recent coursework is quite good. The famous connection, obviously, is to Tom Simpson. And there's been recent work by Mackenzie and Ebert, and that's been really, really good. But there is some standout golf there, some all-world holes, especially middle of the front nine. It's an epic golf course. So well worth making it to the south coast to see. So we know, though, that you don't golf for a living. That's a pastime. So you
Definitely
do work in the... Is it the odds? What would you say? Is it the odds making? Or
Yes. I'd say you'd probably say you work in the betting industry or the sports betting industry. But yeah, I've been in odds compiling and trading since I moved to London in 2008. So like 17 years doing it now. So yeah, good old stint.
So this is an interesting one because it's only relatively recently that we've seen like a properly invested, like a lot of the big company execs coming into golf and turning it into like a live sports betting kind of option, I guess you could say. And betting as a whole seems to have really become mainstream in just the last couple of years for whatever reason. I remember growing up, it was my father who would go and like maybe bet on the horses at some guy's back bedroom in small town Saskatchewan. It's probably some illegal gambling den that I've just given. But it seems like golf is relatively recently kind of entered into this space. So curious about your thoughts maybe as to like why that's happened. Like what is the interest? What is the intrigue by, I guess, sports betting and in particular golf?
I would say that there's a few things that have happened, but interestingly, when I started, America betting online wasn't really a thing because there was loads of sort of rules around preventing it in America. And then 2018, I think it was, the legislation was sort of changed, and so online sports betting started to open up in a lot of the US states. So all of a sudden you had a lot of interest from that side of the pond, and then at the same time you've had like obviously a bit of a stats revolution in golf as well, with all the strokes gain stuff that obviously started quite a long time before that 2018, but it's only sort of become really like mainstream, I'd say, in the last decade. And then obviously you've got the daily fantasy sports in America as well, and that's all sort of fed into just a big increase in people who are interested in betting on golf. And then another dynamic would be the shot tracking stuff that the various tour sites do, and a few different bookmakers as well. And so you can now obviously you can bet on just a ridiculous amount of markets, and you can keep right up to date with how your golfer's doing, basically shot by shot. So in the past, obviously, you'd be waiting for your guy if you had a bet on him to come on the TV coverage. But now, if you want to know how your player's doing on the 12th hole, you can literally log on to the site and see where he is on that hole, what sort of lie he's got, and you can follow it as intensely as you like now.
So maybe that's an interesting one. We'll just open that up for a little bit more discussion. So I think when people think about like betting on golf, in my mind, like the first thing we go to is like, well, I'm going to put down a little bit of cash on who's going to win the Masters or who's going to win a major championship. But there's still that available, but then all the way back to the minutiae. And how granular can you get? So in my mind, I'm thinking like, could you bet on whether someone's going to hit the ball in the fairway or make a sand save? Does it get that granular?
Fairway certainly does. And I think in the past, definitely some firms have tried it to the level of like you mentioned there, with as soon as if a player, it probably would have been the majors where it would have been tried. But yeah, if a player's ball is in the bunker and the betting company who you're trying to bet with, if they can get it opened fast enough, they would be pricing up. Will this player sort of make his par from from the bunker? So yeah, you can get as granular as you like, really, but you're obviously relying on TV coverage being perfectly up to date as well, because obviously if shots are delayed on the coverage, then you probably don't get quite as much interest from customers. But yeah, it's definitely been tried at the bigger events. But things like fairway are a lot easier to offer because you can offer that probably some holes in advance. Even when they're on the 10th hole, you could say, is this player going to hit the fairway on the 13th hole? And then the customer's got plenty of time to place that bet. But obviously things like bunkers and things like that, that's very dependent on where the player is on the hole. But it definitely has been tried. I don't think it really took off, though.
And do you think that golf in and of itself offers like a genuine kind of sporting chance for the punter? And what I mean by that is like you hear these stories with a lot of sports bettings where things could be thrown or there could be insider betting or that type of thing. But golf being as difficult as it is and as random as it is, do you think it offers like maybe a more genuine betting experience, if you will? I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say.
No, I do. And also, you've obviously at the top level, you've obviously got the added incentive of prize money. So, like in some of the sports that have maybe fell foul to a bit of corruption in the past, it would often be sort of linked to players sort of who are playing for quite relatively small amounts, who are seeing that as an opportunity to sort of boost income, really. Whereas in golf, obviously, you see the sums that they play for every week. I mean, I think Ludwig Aberg the other week, I think he won $4 million for
Was that
winning. Yeah, exactly, for winning the Genesis that got relocated to Tory. I think he won $4 million. So you take away all the incentive for any sort of shenanigans, really, when players are playing for that much money.
That's an interesting thing because oftentimes, like in the media, we hear a lot about the insane amounts of money that people are playing for. But in kind of a weird roundabout way, it actually keeps the game pure. It's a weird thing to think about and get your head wrapped around. But actually, with the perhaps hundreds of thousands of millions of people that are actively looking at the game and perhaps having a bit of a flutter, and the amount of money that's being bet, it's probably relatively, when you think about sports betting as a whole, 4 million is probably relatively minor compared to the overall. Yeah, very interesting concept that. So now that we kind of established, why golf is an interesting thing to bet on, or the way. The one thing that kind of springs to my mind is the quote from the U.S. Office series with Michael Scott, and he says, "Oh, Michael, could you explain this to me like I'm 6 years old?" And then the gentleman proceeds to explain it to him, and then he says, "Can you explain it to me like I'm 3 years old?" And I think maybe that's where we need just to jump to, is explain it to me. I said to you before coming on that I'm not a massive bettor. I don't bet, but it does intrigue me. The mathematics behind it and how it works and why it works is always a bit fascinating to me. But can you maybe explain like kind of the structure of how it works? Like what is actually going on when people tune in and decide to put money on the line?
So from an odds compiler's point of view, and let's obviously using golf as the example, I guess. So this week's Bay Hill Invitational, I think there's 70 or 80 players. So at the start of the week, the odds compiler is basically trying to put those players into an order of probability. So highest probability first, which obviously is the favourite, Scheffler, and then he wants to try and put a percentage chance on every player in that 80 field. And obviously, in an ideal world, that would add up to 100%, obviously, because there can only be one winner. So that's what the bookmaker's starting point is, trying to do that and represent each player's chance of winning in a pretty accurate way. From there, once the compiler has sort of represented that accurately as he wishes, you then add in a margin into that as the bookmaker. So say you've got 100 players and you make them all the same price, so you give everybody a 1% chance. Then to add your margin, you might add 0.5%. So every player would then become a 1.5% chance. And then when you turn that into prices, your margin is built into the price that the customer gets. So in theory, if the bookmaker can make all those players get bets on them equally, he then takes his margin out of that. Now, it sounds complicated, but it's just basically you're trying to represent each player's likely chance of winning, and then you're adding a little bit of margin yourself just to cover your back, really, in the hope that you can take money on all the players, and then you take your margin out of the middle, so to speak.
So as a bookmaker, they're effectively making money on 99 losers, effectively, and then they're making their loss on the one that everybody would have chosen and got. So
yeah,
let's break this down. Does that make sense? If I said, is that?
Yeah, no, it does. It's obviously quite a complicated thing to explain, like in a real simplistic way, though. But yeah, you're hoping that the one player who wins, if you're the bookmaker, the one player who wins, you're hoping that you've taken enough money on the other players, so that even people who will win on the person who wins, overall, you're still profitable because you've provided attractive enough prices so that people have wanted to place bets on all the other players as well. I mean, in theory,
Sure.
you're always wanting to get as many players in the tournament with bets on them as possible, and then you're just moving your prices around to try and balance that book. I mean, in practice, it rarely happens that you obviously get a balanced book, but that's sort of the theory.
So yeah, that's an interesting one. So basically, before it all kicks off, the bookmaker is trying to effectively give better odds on a player that they don't think will win to try and get money allocated to that person, and then less odds on the favorite.
Yeah, you're trying to get that biting point where every player looks attractive to somebody, or on that biting point, so that there's interest on all players. It just so rarely happens like that in theory. Like of a 100-player field, you'll probably end up with 10 players who are a liability to you as the bookmaker, and you'll have a lot of players who actually, if they win, it's in your favor, but there'll be some of the weaker players in the field. So it's a bit of a balance.
So that's a really interesting thing, and I guess to know that, effectively they're taking a high level view and they're trying to make a little bit off each one. So their idea as a bookmaker is to make a little bit off each one, and then hopefully when it all comes out in the wash, they're ahead.
Yeah.
But as the punter, you're the one who's trying to basically sneak in and pick the one, and make the bookmaker pay. So the odds are effectively stacked against you, but the ability to make good on it is what entices people to play the game, I guess.
Yeah, because they'll still, like, I think Scheffler is 7-2 favorite this week. Now, so 4.5 in decimal odds. Now there'll be people out there who think that's a good price, and whereas there'll be bookies who think that's a good price. I'll let you place money on that price because I think I've got enough with my margin built in there that I'm happy to take money at that price. Where there'll be plenty of punters out there who think, I think 7-2 still is too big a price. I still want to back that. So yeah, you're always going to try and get that resistance.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. So like I say, for me, who's a relative newbie, I don't have a lot of insight or knowledge when it comes to betting. So like what you said there, Scheffler's odds this week are 7-2 or in decimal 4-5.
4.5.
4.5. What does that actually mean? So again, if I walked into a betting shop and I looked at the screen and it said this week Bay Hill, Scotty Scheffler, 4.5 or 7-2. What does that actually mean? How do I decode that as someone who's new to it? And I've got, what's the best round number to use?
The quick way to do fractions is, so if something's 7-2, it's basically saying for every £2 you put on, if he wins, you win £7 profit. So say you had £2 on Scheffler this week and he wins, you're getting 7 plus you get your stake back. So you're getting 9 back. So you've placed 2, 7 is your profit, and your total is 9 back. So if someone's 5-1, you put £1 on, they win, you win your 5 plus your 1, so you get your 6 back.
Okay, very good. So fairly straightforward. Yeah. Now, can it ever go the other way, where instead of 7/2, then you'd have 2/7?
Yeah. So obviously, if when in golf, you'll sometimes see that when say Scheffler's got a 3-shot lead before the last round this week, he might be 2-7. So at that point, he becomes what's known as odds on. So it then becomes, if you put 7 on, you win in 2 profit. So you can see you've got to put a lot more on to get the smaller amount. Now, a lot of punters still like to bet those sort of prices because they think if Scheffler's 3 clear with the last round to play, a lot of people think that's a done deal. He's already won. So somebody's still letting me win my 2 for my 7. So yeah, it's basically what's known as odds on. So it's where it goes past 50% likelihood of happening, it becomes odds on, shorter than evens.
And is there ever a point where the bookmaker would say, I'm not going to take that bet, where they just say, right, it's done and dusted, this is a foregone conclusion and we're no longer accepting bets on that?
In golf, that's really rare, because for a player to not even, for a bookmaker to not even want to accept bets on a player, it has to be again, it'd have to be late on in round 4. Say Scheffler's got a 6-shot lead with 4 holes left. Now, at that point, there's just no point offering any prices, because he's basically he'd probably win 1,000 out of 1,000 of those. So, golf it has to be a really extreme situation for a bookmaker not to want to offer any outright prices.
And I guess that's that's a good scenario, not just for the punter, but also for the bookmaker, is that right down to the wire, there's always something to bet on. Because then there's just always those opportunities to either make or to earn.
And obviously, if you get situations like that where a player has a big lead, what you can then offer is, say, an outright without that player who's leading. So you then basically make it another tournament. So punters have got the chance to, if they think it's already finished, they can bet without Scotty Scheffler. So there'll be some bookmakers when a player's got a huge lead, you'll take the main guy out of the betting, and you will offer who will win the tournament if you ignored the leader.
So basically, who will come solo second, for example.
Yeah.
So bookmakers are constantly on the lookout for like the next thing to bet on. And if you offer the right odds, then you should get people.
Yeah, you're constantly trying to keep the customers engaged with the product, really. However you can make that interesting for the guy who's sat at home watching on a Sunday evening. That is that's the job of the bookmaker, really.
So maybe there's, this podcast will go out and it'll probably be, the Bay Hill will probably be over by then, but it would be interesting. So just using the Bay Hill as an example. So odds on favorite is Scotty Scheffler this week. Interesting. Who would be the long shot, the dark horse this week with decent odds? And if you pulled it off, who would it be?
I was just looking. I actually saw this earlier. The rank outsider this week is a guy called Rafael Campos. I think he's 500 to 1. 500 to 1. So £1 wins you 500 if he wins. And you'll probably be able to get 1,000 to 1 with other bookmakers as well. He's seen as basically impossible, but it does happen.
Okay. It does happen. So do you have that where some certain punters will say, look, if I see really long odds like that in a golf tournament, I will plan to lose £10 every week until my boat comes in, and then when I do get 1,000 to 1, then it'll make up for it.
Yeah, you do often see like punters, you do sometimes see that the worst result for the company is the biggest price, because it obviously doesn't take a lot of stakes at those sort of prices to build up a big liability. It's like when Leicester won the Premier League. I think a lot of bookmakers reported that they lost money, even though they were 3,000 to 1 before the season started. You'll often find that start of the season, there might be a few Leicester fans who'll just have a tenner on. Before you know it, that becomes quite a big liability at 3,000 to 1. So in the end, most people would think, oh, the bookies must have cleaned up when Leicester won. But in actual fact, it's the opposite. You can actually still lose out when a rank outsider wins.
It's very, very interesting. So we'll have to see how this is it Campos, you said, was the
Rafael
dark horse,
Campos,
500 to 1. Yeah. Rafael Campos. Good. And maybe looking ahead, this will probably go out before the majors this year. So the big question every year with Augusta is Rory. Is he going to complete the Grand Slam? At this point in time, from the bookmaker, odds maker's point of view, are you thinking about the Masters at this point, or are you saying, look, the week before we'll get our heads wrapped around that and see what kind of run Rory's on?
Yeah, you're obviously you're always offering the 4 majors because whatever time of year it is, customers do want to place bets on those. So early in the season, you'll often see people who are playing well in like regular PGA or European events. They will get customers interested in them for the majors, and especially the Masters. But Rory, it's a fun. What is he now? He's like 40 majors without a win, isn't it? So it's like, you do hope that he does finally do it in his career, especially the Masters being the career Grand Slam. But you can see the weight that he feels on him every year, and I guess as the years go on, it just gets heavier and heavier. But you would hope. I mean, he's still playing to such a high level. Like he is genuinely still top 2 or 3 in the world. It feels like if it's going to happen, it'll happen probably maybe in a few years when he's out of form and the expectation's gone.
Yeah, almost like Phil Mickelson getting one across the line when he's like, and everybody's forgot about him.
Maybe it'll be Rory at 48, something like that, which seems weird to think about. When you've seen his whole career, that's when you know you're getting older. I mean, I've basically seen all of Rory's careers. It's an amazing career, and he still plays to such a high level. He's played to a silly level now for sort of almost 20 years. 15, 16 years he's been his levels hardly dropped in that time. It was just obviously he won all those majors so early in his career, and then straight away people think that you can continue, and obviously it's so unrealistic to think that. I think he won 4 out of his sort of first. What was it? 4 out of his first 10 major starts might have been wins.
Yeah, he was going to get like 40 majors by the time he was like 25. People are like, oh yeah, Phil or Tiger and Jack who?
Exactly.
And so now I think he's probably at the point where he'd be happy if he was if he had more majors than Faldo. But
yeah, that needs to happen, doesn't it? Yeah. And obviously the heartbreak of what happened at Pinehurst last year, that was the biggie, because that felt a bit like, a lot of the time you can't really control winning, of course. Like, you can bump into players who just beat you, and that obviously felt like a bit like pilot error, didn't it? On those last few holes. I mean, I think the 18th was really difficult on him, but like that, I think it was the 16th he missed that real short put after a good bunker shot. That was the one that really hurt. But I mean, he's not sulked about it. He's come back out and he's playing really good stuff again. So it's like he'll go into the tournament in good form as always. It's just he'll need some breaks, like you always need when you're going to win.
Absolutely, it's got to go. And that's the thing, like, people look at that at Pinehurst last year where Rory missed it, and it was like that really slippery downhill, kind of left to right or right to left, or I can't remember, but it was like even the best players in the world could easily miss that putt, even just on a practice round, and not think anything of it. It's just when you have the gravity of that situation and the gallery, and and it's just amplified. Like, it's a missed putt, but to be fair, even the best players in the world were going to miss that probably the majority of the time, especially with that amount of pressure on them. So it's an interesting one. When you're sitting there, I mean, like, as an odds maker, you're obviously a massive fan of golf, and you've got like an encyclopedic knowledge of these players and what kind of streaks they're on and all the rest of it and where they're going. Like, how much do you look at things like the golf course architecture, the way the course is set up, and then how that relates to individual players? And would you say, well, I've just gotten an innate feeling for Rory. Rory does really well at Quail Hollow, so the odds for Rory at the PGA this year aren't going to be that great because he's probably an odds-on favorite because he seems to win every time he goes there. Like, does that come into your thought process, or do you just more look at the run that these players are on and thinking, well, the best players will always just rise to the top and it doesn't really matter which course they're on?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest weight of a player's sort of prediction each week is basically like the scores that they've been shooting over however, whatever you determine as being statistically significant sort of period of time. So obviously, if someone was good 3 years ago, but they've been rubbish for that's when you start to ignore things like how good they were 3 years ago. But like, I think course fit is an interesting one, because there is definitely some courses where, and Augusta's a good example of that. Really, you do see players who genuinely like just play a totally different level when they get to certain courses, whether that's the way the whole shape or the carries that are involved or the speed of the greens. Like, there is, I mean, you can take it to whatever sort of granular level as you like, really. But yeah, you definitely see certain courses have a have characteristics that lend themselves to like certain players succeeding. But usually in the modern game, it's usually around driving distance. That seems to be the, unfortunately, like, it does seem to be, they're the sort of players who end up getting favoured a lot of the time. It's the bombers.
Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting one. So like, so last year, for example, just thinking about Oberg, so amazing finish at the Masters. If you're sitting there making odds for Oberg this year at the Masters, he's been relatively quiet. I mean, obviously the Ryder Cup, a great showing, and then relatively quiet since then. As far as like headline acts where he's really had top finishes, et cetera, et cetera. But would you look at last year's Masters and say, actually, he did really well on that course? I know it's his debut, so it's only one of one, but based on that, this year we expect him to do a little bit, to do just as well? Or do you say a blip on radar?
Yeah, no, he's definitely one to be very wary of. Like, if, as we know, Augusta, first time up at Augusta is typically impossible to like win, isn't it? Well, not impossible, but if you can show up and do what he did on a first start at a course like that, it's like I think you put even more weight on that performance because he's played so well there with no previous starts there. So it's almost like you upgrade. I think as an odds maker, you would upgrade that performance because, he's done it on debut. It's like so, and this year obviously, like he had a funny end to last year, but just recently, obviously, he won at Torrey Pines. Like he's very much on the radar. Like he'd be one who I'd be very wary of as a bookie, and there'll be a lot of punters who want to back him for Augusta for sure.
Yeah,
he's in good form, and he did well last year. That's usually the two things that a lot of customers would be looking at. Is he playing well? Has he shown good stuff at the course? And it's loud and clear. Like, he ticks both of those boxes well.
Right. So we've got to we've covered a lot of ground, and I think it'll probably give everybody. This is like the introductory one. I think, as I called it, sports betting for dummies. And I think I said to you previously that I'm going to ask the really stupid questions because I think for me it's been very insightful, but then also for a lot of our listeners who I think it's one of those things where a lot of people look at and they don't really understand, but they just feign that they do. And I'm quite happy to say that I'm the idiot and ask the stupid questions for everybody's benefit on this one. So that's fine. So here's the question for you then to end. How do punters sniff out if you've got a moderate or even a deep knowledge of golf and you follow the professional tours, how do you sniff out the bargain? How do you sniff out the
value?
Or is there such a thing? So maybe just a top tip because you said a lot of times the bombers get the benefit. They're the ones that are favorited. And then current kind of, are they on a current hot streak and have they played there well before? So Oberg, obviously, for the Masters. That's one to watch, one to look for. I did notice that you kind of skirted around the Rory question, so we'll have to wait and watch for the odds on that one. But how do you sniff out?
No, sorry. So, the Rory. So the Rory prize for the Masters, is that what you asked?
Yeah. So is he going to get it done, or where is he at?
I mean, I don't think he will win it this time around, but I think he's about 9 to 1, 10 to 1, something like that. So okay. I mean, he'll have plenty of support, but if I was to say, will he win?
You would say no. And who's the favorite at the minute for Augusta?
Yeah, Scheffler. Scheffler's he's the clear number one best player in the world. Obviously, won round there, so it's like he's and he's still playing at such a high level. Like, he's the favorite every time he pegs it up at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good. So we got that. So how do I then, maybe we finish on this one. How do I, as a punter, give myself the best opportunity to? We're not talking about serious cash. Like I'm gonna, sell my house and put it all on Rory to win the Masters. Not this. This is like just a, we're having a little bit of fun. We're obviously gambling the amount of money that we're possibly able to lose without affecting our life or our children's lives or wives' lives or whoever it might be. So, how do we sniff out the bargain?
Well, there's loads of ways you can tackle it, but yeah, you're right. You're trying in simple terms, you're trying to get information basically on a player probably before the bookies have realised how good they are. So following what I would say is following sort of the collegiate stuff in the US has always been a good little place to research, especially as they're just starting to turn pro. If you can sort of get an early heads up on a player who's got loads of promise, and he's going to hit the ground running when he joins like the paid ranks. The only problem with that nowadays is that even the college stuff is so well publicized. Like back in the day, probably in the early stages of like Twitter and things, like you weren't hearing about all these amazing college players. So if you were just digging into the results yourself by searching some of the college websites, you will be able to get some really good info on the players who are up and coming. Obviously, that there's a really good amateur. I think he's just about to turn pro now. Luke Clanton in the States. In fact, he got his card on the tour because he made the cut on Friday. He's going to be. I mean, he's playing up to an incredible level already. So it's basically the more you can dig into the niche sort of areas, I'd say, and do your own sort of research. Maybe go a bit against the grain of what is popular. Try and find things out that it's quite likely that maybe a bookmaker won't know. It's things like that. It's up and coming players from, and I give the example there, the college system in the States, but you can still have a good eye on things that are happening in Europe as well. And you're just looking for that progressive, explosive sort of big hitting talent who maybe is not on everyone else's radar. And then you can sort of get ahead of it before the bookmakers realize how good they are.
Mm-hmm. So there we go. Top tips for all of our listeners from Michael Verity. So very good. It's such a fascinating thing. Like if you're a seasoned veteran to putting money on bets, this is all the ground that we've covered is relatively simple, and probably, this was entry level 101. But for a lot of our listeners who don't bet, but are curious about it, it's constantly in the news. And I guess that's probably just an indication of how much money is changing hands, simply because, that's what makes the wheels spin in the world. So if you're hearing about it, chances are there's money changing hands at some point. So it's really interesting to be able to chat with you, to have the perspective not only of an odds maker, but also from the puncher's point of view, but then also the game that the bookmakers or the betting houses are actually doing as well. So to have a kind of an insider's view of the whole spectrum of the sports betting at the minute, and someone who's done it for many, many years. So really appreciate your time, Michael.
No problem.
Hopefully it won't be that too much longer before we get out back on the golf course. And then we'll be able to have some of these chats in person. But thank you so much for your time. Enjoy your golf down at Hayling whenever you make it there next.
Cheers, Jasper. Thanks. No problem.